The Adventures of Emrys, a tale of bravery and stupidity, is now available as a high-definition audiobook. It was by chance that the four companions would be tasked by Gunderin to complete the perilous journey to the remote mining town of Fandolin. They were to carry goods into the town in a small brown wagon. There sat two gnomes, Hector and Giggit. They may have shared species, but the similarities ended at this truth. Hector was an upstanding gnome with a scruffy beard and an infinite smile, but Giggit was a recluse, a scoundrel, a thief, and a nobody. Not being known was an advantage to him, and he knew it. He silently carried two thin-bladed weapons beneath his cloak at all times. They were small daggers for a man of average stature, but as a gnome, Giggit was anything but average. The knives looked like medium-sized short swords in his small hands. Trailing behind on his mighty steed, Teft, a renowned halfling known for his girth and his courage, was also one of the four companions. He hadn't said much up until this point, but his heart, which was too big for his halfling body, suddenly filled with dread. There'll be goblins ahead, I can feel it. He shouted at the old man, taking the reins of the velvet brown horse who carried the burden of the wagon and its load. The old man turned back and retorted, "We'll see when we see, won't we?" in a rather demeaning fashion. His name was Emrys, and was known in Fandolin as the Wandering Fool. He was perhaps as reckless as he was stupid, but he seemed to carry a wisdom that lay deep within him, beneath his thick skin. It was at this moment when the horse took a sharp bend, revealing a stretch of road ahead. It was visibly blocked by a large tree trunk. "We're going to have to navigate past this," muttered Giggit. But the trees had grown far too dense for this to be possible. "Not to worry," announced Emrys, who was looking smacker than usual. "I have the spell for just this kind of blockage. It's happened to me many a time." At this moment he drew his large wooden staff and cast it at the felled tree, muttering under his breath. A whistling came from behind in the woods, and suddenly the road was flooded with a great gust of wind. His dirty white hair started blowing forwards, and within seconds the log started to rise. It slowly sat down on the bank beside the road. The old wizard looked genuinely surprised at the accomplishment. He had never achieved the feat before in his time on the planet. "You see, works every time," he boasted. His excitement was short-lived, however. A sharp arrow emerged from the trees behind and pierced Emrys in the shoulder, causing him to fall ungraciously to the floor. 3 unfriendly goblins appeared behind the group from the trees. However, the surprise was up. Teft was already facing, javelin in hand. He threw it with great force and precision, if it was to be believed that he had in fact aimed for the tree trunk purposefully. Despite this, the goblins seemed to be frightened from the retaliation, and they withdrew back into the dense forest. After some hours traveling more, the companions stumbled across a goblin encampment. Giggard clapped with glee. The group had not yet been spotted by the goblins, and it was their turn to act on the element of surprise. The group never saw Giggard's attack. He silently slit the goblins' throats one by one as they sat round the campfire. It was ruthless and efficient. The goblins had been guarding the entrance to a cave, which had been concealing the path of a river that they tracked for a long while. They slowly entered, not needing to mask the sounds of their footsteps, due to the great ruckus caused by the water crashing on the rocks. Inside was a small labyrinth of tunnels and paths, built presumably by goblins and other feral creatures. They soon found a large chamber filled with goblins and a cage containing an unhealthy-looking man. Emrys had of course ignored the man and started raising his staff almost to the ceiling. Quickly, as if an afterthought, he span around to face the others and said, "Who might benefit from being closer to the ground?" With worried faces from his companions, he cast the staff to the ground, and a wave of lightning emerged from the highest point, quickly filling the room with a pulsating beam of energy. With that, all the goblins dropped to the floor, fried. Emrys turned back to see the impressed faces of 2 gnomes and a halfling. However, he only saw 3 slightly burning humanoids laying on the floor in agony. "Gratefulness is a lost art," sneered the old man. The adventurers swiftly left the cave and journeyed on to complete their quest, taking them to the remote mining town of Phandalin in just a matter of days. It was at the inn where they discovered some dark happenings in the town. Red brand thugs had been bullying the townsfolk for a while. At this, the group decided they would not go their merry ways after handling the cargo, but would investigate the strange happenings in the town of Phandalin. The next day they took the wagon and horse to the provision store, where Emrys bartered to take a greater sum of gold for the trouble, naturally. They had been told that some of the thugs resided at the Stone Hill Bar, so after a hard day's drinking at the inn, leaving Taft immobile, the 3 remaining walked to meet the Red Brands. Here at the bar, they started a big fucking fight and killed like 3 people. The instigator was of course Emrys, who at this point had pretty much no redeeming qualities. He had used some ancient magic to make himself invisible, and he hit the Red Brands with his wooden stick, followed by Giggard throwing an acid at a man and Hector slicing up another. Classic prep crawl. The last man ran away up a large hill towards a great derelict mansion, and the gang gave chase, bringing Taft along with them. When the companions made it to the peak of the hill, they investigated the mansion. The doors were unlocked and it seemed empty and unused. That was until Giggard called out from downstairs that he had found something. That something was the entrance to a basement which quickly became a tunnel leading far beneath the mansion. Emrys led the way through many a dark passage until he fell into the great pit, causing him tremendous hurt. It was 20 feet deep and barely hidden. In an attempt to rescue the old man, 2 more fell into the pit. They were rescued eventually using a rope to find themselves in a tomb, At this moment, skeletons arose from their coffins, and a great battle ensued. Behind the spooky skeletons was a couple of cages with some civilians, a mother, her son, and daughter. They were freed by Gigot's marvelous lock-picking skills. Soon, the group were in deep thought on how to traverse the three back over the pit safely. As the edge was narrow and dangerous, this point, Emrys remembered that he could grow fucking wings and attempted to carry them across. He dropped both children in the pit, taking one to the brink of death and giving the other broken legs. He managed to carry the far heavier mother across just fine, though. After having transported 4 people across the pit, including Gigit, a brave and trusting soul, Teft and Hector decided that it was too risky, and they both crossed the perilous ledge instead. The group took the NPCs to the stairs where they vanished, and then carried on into the deep tunnels, chancing across many a red-blind thug, which were tied and gagged in their rooms. Soon the companions found their path blocked by a room full of ruffians. Having thought of this eventuality, Hector used a spell to cloak their path through the room. However, Teft, with great incompetence, dropped their load of javelins on the floor, alerting the men. I delivery of javelins for you, sir," whimpered Teft. "I didn't order any javelins. They must be for the armorer. Get on your way." And with that, Teft promptly picked up his spears and left the room to join the others. "The dice hate me," he said, a common curse against the unjust. As the gang left, they encountered a wizard in purple robes. He left swiftly and seemingly disappeared. Emrys, who was late to the occasion after having rifled through the possessions of said wizard already, said, "Have you tried the rope trick?" The others looked confused. "The rope trick," he said again. "It's an old wizard trick to find those who hide from sight." He promptly got out a long piece of rope and handed one end to Teft, who stood in the doorway with his javelin out, seemingly completing some sort of isometric exercise. With that, the old man wandered to the far side of the room and slowly started fanning out. Then he packed away the rope and pushed a stone on the wall, which revealed a secret passage which led back to the tomb. In the distance, somewhere down the tunnel, he heard a cry of agony and a long delayed thump. However, he thought nothing of it. The group decided to leave the caves through an opening in the forest which they had discovered earlier. Passing closely by a large purple demonic being who was badly attempting to hide behind a thin stone pillar. He was an immense foe, as he had been collecting many weaknesses and secrets from the group since their arrival through telepathy. Though this didn't matter, since the group never even noticed it and walked straight out. The companions, who had seemingly defeated many foes and won the admiration of the innkeeper, decided they wanted more quests, so they walked into the inn at 4 a.m., and Emrys exclaimed, "I would like to talk to the most depressed person in the room." At this cry, the 3 late-night patrons of the bar looked to their drinks, to the window, and to the floor, anything but to look at the piercing eyes of Emrys. The unluckiest of the drinkers was a young man, sobbing into his cup. The group closed in on him, and Emrys interrogated him for some while, eventually finding out that there are some orcs who cause trouble in the mines. However, he could not tell the group where to kill said orcs. At this, the group decided to go and ask the town mayor where to kill the orcs. However, it was still 4 in the morning, so they decided to sleep instead. Knock, knock, knock went the town hall doors. Emrys had not decided to sleep, instead to call on the mayor, who was not in the town hall because he owns his own house. Knock, knock, knock. Emrys continued the beating of the drums deep into the morning until at sunrise he was confronted by the mayor. "Where can I find the orcs?" blasted Emrys. "What orcs?" the mayor replied. "The orcs that keep raiding the mines," Emrys spat. Oh, the mayor sighed. The orcs could be found far to the east, is what Emrys had gathered after a long talk. "Oh, and can you arrest that purple wizard? Thanks." "Okay," Emrys replied. And with that, Emrys returned to the group to tell of the news, and they set on their way eastwards. After 3 days of travelling east, the companions found their way near a large rock formation. Teft and his dog had keen noses, so they ran off ahead to find an orc encampment. He peered down, and as he looked, a small but nimble orc raised his arm and pointed towards him. Teft now began thinking of the best way to defeat his new foe from such a distance. And just as he figured out how it could best be accomplished, he looked up again to see the orc sprinting into a group of other orcs surrounding the camp. They were clearly talking to each other. With this in mind, he brought the rest of the group forward, and they travelled down to sneak up on said orcs, who apparently would not be expecting them, according to Teft. When the companions arrived at the encampment, they were expected by the orcs, which was of great surprise to all but one. The orcs quickly surrounded them, despite walking through some thick spikes laid by Hector, who at this point had turned into a large brown bear, and a great battle ensued. The great ogre, which had crawled out of the cave to face them, quickly dispatched many a great hit with his large club. He soon became alone as the orc leader was slain, causing the rest of the orcs to flee. Soon, only Emrys and Teft remained, and with a passing wisdom, the wizard said, "Remember, if he hurts me, hit him back." And just like that, an enormous blunt object fell on Emrys's head, causing him to pass very close with the next realm once again. However, fate, or maybe other ways, had decided that his adventurous time was not yet upon them, and Teft bravely killed the ogre alone. The friends began to regain their strength. A hard battle was fought, and not a single one of them felt revived after their tremendous injuries. However, they packed their things and began the long journey back towards Fendelin. Many an encounter did they find upon the trail, including some fellow gnomes who were quietly rescued from their goblin captors. One of the greatest burdens fell upon Giggard, who had assumed many treasures and tools in the travels leading up to the orc battle. His muddy boots began to tear as his weight pulverized them slowly under the repeated pressure of his stride. Soon they came upon Fendelin once more. They were happy to reunite with the mayor, and eventually they came across an elf woman. Our quest is to find the purple wizard, the one known as Yanu. Emrys chanted in Elvish to the shrine keeper. I may know of such a wizard. He is perhaps headed north, she said. If you will retrieve my book from Coneyberry, I may provide you with the more accurate information. The collective facial mood of the group suddenly turned sour. They had just come from Coneyberry, and did not at all wish to return so soon. Despite this, the wizard agreed, and with a cunning look on his face. Once the elf was out of earshot, he explained to the group, "We can trick the woman into giving us this information, if we only write a novel of our own." Confusion sat upon the companions as they pondered how they would find the time to write a book and what its contents would be. The funny joke is, that is this book, in a really meta and self-referential way. The group at once started heading north, towards Thunder Tree. They were to phone near the time it takes to retrieve the scripture from the elf woman, and attempt to find clues about Yanu as a secondary objective. Our path took them alongside the woodland of Neverwinter. Keeping to its boundaries at all times, it wasn't long until they heard a large rustling coming from the forest. And a giant winged beast approached at high velocity and with deathly intent. At this, Hector fell deep on his inner knowledge, and was reminded of his time with the great eagles of the south. A magic force swept over him as he grew his size tenfold, becoming a great feathered being of his own. Hector took to the sky as if it were second nature, and began attacking the beast with his long talons and his sharp beak. Emrys too grew his incorporeal wings, and lifted Gigot to the heavens, at which height he began to throw acid at the dark shadow. A great clawing from Hector slayed the thing, and it fell to the floor as a pebble down a well. That night they were handsomely fed on bird meat. One more day passed, and the companions travelled for many hours along the strait. Just as darkness grew upon them once more, they stumbled across a short man, carrying a mahogany lute and little else. They introduced themselves to one another, and the man who had proclaimed to be a bard began to sing and strum many songs written on the spot. The pleasantries were short-lived, however. His manner became foul, and he demanded to be paid for his work. The group obliged but begrudgingly. Soon he was charging a premium, and felt like he could get away with murder without consequence. Tensions rised almost as fast as his prices, and soon he began singing songs which were rather stranger than kindly to the group. A wave of sleepiness overcame them, and one by one they were knocked into their subconscious. When they woke, the bard was nowhere to be seen, and so with that they continued on their journey. At last they reached the town of Thunder Tree. It was not quite as they expected. Burned and derelict, they were astonished by the size of the great Thunder Tree, which was not the size of any naturally occurring tree that they had encountered before, but seemed more magical and mystical. They travelled to the top of a hill, which stood a large building and turret, which was missing its steeple or roof. Inside the room was old and long forgotten. However, laying upon a chest was the body of a man, they thought. His purple robes drooped to the floor in a defeated manner. Yanu was dead, and seemingly slaughtered by something impressive, judging by his wounds. Among his stuffs were a couple of scrolls, one with great wizard text on it, which told of great lightning and power. It was clearly important. Peering into the turret room, they found their astonishment a sleeping poison dragon, green and incredible, awesome and powerful. They knew they could not fight it alone, so they began deep thought on a potential next move. Then they traveled outwards, back towards the great thunder tree. Their quest was simple and certain. Cast the great scroll of lightning and thunder upon the tree of the same name. Gigot was entrusted with the honor, as it was his mind whom the plan had wandered to. He said the magic words across the page, slowly and carefully. The great power of the occasion was apparent, and even as he said the words, a great wind picked up. The sky turned a deathly grey, blue, and then even purple. The clouds thickened and rubbed, and the tension and energy was almost too much to handle. At once, a great spurt of lightning tore from the scroll. An impossible pole of energy disintegrated it and passed to the tree in a transfer of power unknown to many who lived. In an abhorrent misjustice of storytelling, the lightning struck the tree and absolutely nothing occurred but a large explosion and the ignition of the thunder tree, making the group wonder if they had perhaps overestimated the cognitive linguistic ability of the god who drew their journey path through life. As the clouds cleared and the blue skies that they had once enjoyed returned, they could think of nothing more but to attempt the murder of the dragon which they had met within the tower on the hill. However, such a game would require many hours of thoughtful planning, so they did. It was airtight. The three brave souls, Teft, Hector, and Gigit, would sneak past the great beast and attack it from behind. In a panic, the dragon would turn to face battle and engage the three, who would hold out and keep it slashing its front half, while sneakily Emrys would cast powerful spells from his staff into the tail end of the mystical creature, signing its death in no short order. It went almost as planned. The three distracted it well, and held fast against its beaten attacks. But no short person can withstand the might of a dragon, let alone an angry dragon, for too long. Hector took many hits as a bear, but held strong long enough for the damage of Emrys and the combined power of a team to finally slay the thing. Its tough scale head was taken as a trophy once the conclusion of the battle had dawned. All wounds were healed, and a great magical axe was located among the dragon's horn. It was upon Teft that this treasure would behold. It seemed to cut through anything wooden. This marks the end of Chapter 1. Release me, you fiends, and forge the chains of Ascot. It's unfair. It's not true. I won't fit. I won't fit in there. This is an outrage. I will not fit. I will not fit. You don't know what you've done to this world. The Adventures of Emrys. If you are sitting comfortably, I will begin Chapter 2. The group, having achieved what they had believed impossible, began their long journey south. They had been some time in Thundertree, and their presence was no longer required. Emrys had taken Yanu's long flowing robes and their royal plum-toned pigment, while Hector hid the severed head of the dragon, whom had been slain at the great peril of the four friends. It was high time they returned to Phandalin, as their attendance was expected. It wasn't long until they looked out on a familiar face. The moon was shining brightly as their barred thief emerged from the dense forest.
Please, sirs, I didn't mean it. I simply need some clothes, that's all.
And with that, Emrys raised his staff almost to the ceiling. Teft brandished his recently acquired axe, and Giggart unsheathed his cold steel daggers.
No, you're right. I'm wrong. I'm a hairy bastard.
And with that, he took swiftly to the woods and into the darkness, from where he would not be seen again. His story may have been a tragedy or a comeuppance. Either way, his role was minor, and it is spoken for many of the group that there was gladness when his presence was decidedly ended. And so they walked on, stride after stride. Their path took them many leagues further south still. Their weary legs were beginning to make themselves known, and the group felt much pain with every step. It was at this point when the noise of distress called out. The strong ears of the halfling Teft had identified it first. A child's voice, it cried out with great terror. Then the noise of laughter. The woodland revealed a group of young hooligans surrounding a particularly thick oak tree. They had just noticed the old man approaching at a walking pace. "You will withdraw from this tree of immediate effect," boomed the man, his voice echoing thrice his usual volume. "Do you know who I am? Are you in fact deaf? Stupid? I'll turn you all into toads, into mayflies," he cried. The youth ceased their smirk rather quickly at this development, and began a hasty retreat far from Emrys into the safety of the forest. He smiled. The young boy they had heard just minutes ago was perched at the top of the tree. He had been bullied into collecting a quail egg from the very highest branch, but he could not get down alone. As the group wondered how to help him reach the safety of solid terrain, Emrys started muttering some magic words. through thistle and tree. Wind, come to me, past bark and rest, I cast gust. At the very moment he completed his poem, a strong whistling came from deep within the forest. It blew his outer white hair forward in a chaotic mess, directly towards the top of the tree. The flurry hit home with perfect precision, and the quail's egg fell to the ground where it could be retrieved and eaten. The stand faces of Hector, Giggart, and Taft surprised the wondering fool. They had seen him complete many a task less trivial than this, and it was not until he saw Hector swiftly bandaging the boy that he had puzzled the high-velocity impact of the boy with the earth that had just recently occurred. A worried mother came rushing towards the boy hurriedly, before thanking the group immensely for defending him. At night, they were well fed and slept in the safety of their family home, till the morn, when they journeyed on southwards, with pieces of pie in each of their pockets. Tip-tap, tip-tap, click. The goblin had made a grave mistake. The silent pursuit of the group had carried on far too long unnoticed. Betrayal of the twig on the dense forest floor was all Hector needed to spin around to face the unfortunate creature. His little green eyes just visible between the dark trunks. And just like that, he span to and began a hasty retreat into the forest eastwards. Hector gave chase, of course, and the rest followed suit as fast as their little legs could carry them. They hadn't strayed too far eastwards into the forest when the companions came across a great incline. This led them steeply towards a large stone castle, which, presumably, was the intended destination of their little pointy-eared stalker, who had of course not made it that far. Some preparation was required, because while goblins can be weak and stupid, the castle was well built and serviceable. A brazen attack would not fare too well, they thought. So a sneakier and more well-informed insurgent seemed to be the best idea they had. Emrys flew his incorporeal wings and flew to the heights of the battlements, where he saw many orc archers who began raining arrows towards the friends. They may not have been entirely accurate, but their quantity was great, and so the heroes were confined to the walls of the castle. In the blind spot of the archers, where they could not be shot by a stray bolt, they had but one choice at this very moment: the front wooden entrance of the fortress. The arrows drew ever closer, as all four used their might to break down the large wooden door. As it crashed down, a storm of ash and dust filled the entrance. They stepped inside. Clearly, they were not alone. 3 paths had shown themselves, each with a platoon of orcs brandishing their weapons of many color. It was as they feared. There was only one way forwards. To battle. Teft unhooked his axe from his leather sling. Giggard released his knives. Hector weighed his scimitar in his hands. It drew a little blood from his fingers. The old man closed his eyes and held out his staff forwards. The gnomes looked to the east corridor, the halfling to the west. Emrys did not move a muscle in his body. The orcs grinned before marching towards the companions with great confidence. It was their confidence which was their downfall, however. The finesse of the short ones showed, as their fighting skills had been well experienced. The orcs found it a hard task to lay hits on the poor beings, despite their prowess as strong men. It was in the heat of battle that a deafening clash was heard from the northern corridor. The remaining orcs held their ears in agony as the blast from Emrys' wooden staff made itself known, before dropping to the ground in a surely embarrassing defeat. The friends regrouped and began their sweep of the castle. It was within a large, dark chamber, some ways into the keep, where trouble struck once again. Emrys had been feeling the cold, dusty walls for secret entrances and other common importances when his hand fell upon a loose stone. He pressed it inwards without a second thought. The large beast fell from the ceiling heights. It was a grick, a horrid, venomous monstrosity resembling a garden worm. Only its size was that of a wild ox. It had a great beak and 4 terrible tentacles, and made an unholy screeching sound like nothing they had heard before. It was a vile creature from a darker time. How it had found itself here would be a mystery, even to the oldest and the wisest. It bit Emrys on its short fool and paralyzed him with immediate effect. The companions once again leaped into combat, and a few clean hits of sword and axe were enough to kill the thing. As they helped the old man onto his feet, they heard a calling from behind. A familiar voice spoke.
Hey, you there. You must save us on my demise.
Now that's a voice we didn't expect to hear in the darker places of the world, sputtered Emrys, barely able to stand. They had found the dwarf Gundry, who had sent them on their quest originally.
You don't mind undoing my chains, do you? I'm a little tied up at the moment.
Giggard untied the beaten man.
So you're Emrys, and the fields that followed you with the cargo.
You better watch your language. We've got through a lot to get here, and I expect some gratefulness. Despite the early scuffle, both parties were happy to see each other once more. They picked up the dwarf carefully and began to search for an exit. It was on their passage back through the castle when the companions and the new dwarf damsel chanced upon a great mess hall, filled with hungry goblins and orcs alike. However, learning this came at a cost. There Emrys stood, his head touching the ceiling of the wooden doorframe, and many beady eyes were set upon him in a mix of confusion and anger. "It is I, Dragoon the Great. I am your terrible god, and you fear me greatly." Emrys stepped through the door and raised his arms. He seemed to have grown in size, maybe 1, maybe 2 feet taller than his usual self. His eyes were glowing a deep red, and his voice held a power and authority that it never before. "You are commanded to do my bidding, and you must take the journey down the moat and swiftly up again, 500 times. Only then can you be permitted to rest." The little green things were shaking considerably. The sight of their god compelled them to do as he bid, and they raced to exit the castle and begin their exercise. It was only when the last soul fell from exhaustion that it crossed his mind that they weren't exactly religious at all. Little matter to the friends, however, as they passed away and into the forest without any resistance. 3 more long hours, and the journey south finally came to an end. The sight of Fandolin in the distance was a relief to all, including their friend Gundren. Emotions were high when suddenly Teft tripped on a deep root. He went to stand up and brush himself off, but he realized he was pinned to the ground. Someone had grabbed his ankle. Let me go, he cried, but it was no use. It was at this moment when Gundren too fell to the floor, swiftly followed by Hector and then Emrys. The roots of a great willow tree had grown suspiciously quickly around the feet of the 4. Giggard stood carefully to avoid the spreading arms. Hef found himself within a wooden cage, slowly constricting his airflow as he was pinned tightly to the hard clay-redden ground. All of a sudden, light flooded the area as Giggard's hands began to glow as he rubbed them together. A flame produced, hit the tree quickly, and the wood started to burn. It was highly effective. A great hissing came from the tree. Perhaps it was air escaping the burning wood, or perhaps it was the tree crying in agony. Either way, magic defeated magic once again as the roots quickly released the 4 trapped souls and 2 very old-looking skeletons from further down. The travelers were well returned to the town, and a ritual greeting with the mayor was inevitable. He told them of the Black Spider, the employer evident of the wizard Yano, and news that he was hidden in the lost mines of Fandelver. The dwarf Gundren spoke up at this point, as he pulled a large, old, and withered map from his pockets. He explained it would lead the way to these caves, and that he could take the group there in a matter of days. It was decided, and Gundren packed his things for an adventure. Once again, the companions found themselves in a cold, noisy, and rocky environment. They had to cross a dangerous bridge to reach Wayvickle Cave, and the atmosphere seemed uninviting, to say the least. If they were to die somewhere, this mine would be it, Hector had thought silently. Gundren was thinking thoughts of his brothers whom had been lost for days. He secretly hoped they would be reunited within the lost caves. Left thought of his dog, Scout. and how he may never see the light of the sun again to play. Gigot thought hopeful thoughts of passing through the caves undetected, as he fumbled with his knives in his pockets with a vague anxiety. The mind of the wandering fool was cloudy at best. Most of his attention was on the here and now, and the close future and past seemed little different in the great written lore of old, or the ancient prophecies that had yet to come. The last little feet crossed the bridge. There was no turning back now. The immediate entrance opened up to a large cavernous area, stalagmites and stalactites eating up the room. Emrys's staff glowed brightly, revealing the corpse of a long-dead friend in the distance. Gundren dropped his sword and ran to comfort the thing.
Oh no, it's my brother. I knew I might find him here,
he sobbed. A wave of sadness touched the companions equally. The quest could not end here. A large cliff-faced drop released down into impenetrable darkness of mist and fog. The friends tied together all the rope they carried and fastened them around some of the larger stalagmites. They began to lower themselves to the ground, one by one. First went Emrys, who had a greater weight than he did strength in his weakened old hands. He made it halfway down before tumbling the rest, receiving great wounds through the rocky fall.
My bloody arm!
Once the others had arrived at the bottom, he was helped up and aided skillfully to continue on their journey through the mines. The ceiling was low and damp. Occasional struts and wooden supports held the ancient mine intact. They had incorporated the use of an old trick, written deep within the wizard's manual. It was to follow the left-hand rule. Always keep to the left wall of the mines, to avoid getting lost deep in forgotten areas. Another dead end. They had been walking or crawling for some hours now, but this was different. The moisture on the wall seemed reflective somewhat. It was very unusual indeed. As they went to turn back on themselves, the damp began to collect on the walls and the stone roof ahead of them. Before their very eyes, a large blob of golden liquid formed out of the glowing puddles. It was magically sentient and hostile. A quick swipe from Teft's axe sliced it in half very effectively. However, being a liquid-based life form, this only doubled the number of foes to face. Some quick thinking and spellcasting had to be done. Emrys fired magical missiles from his staff, while Gigot released fire from his burning hands and Hector swung his magical flame blade. The beast cried as the latent heat from the companions' magical weapons dissipated it. The left-hand rule took the companions far and deep into the caves. They felt a tension rise as they approached a sharp metal door. Gigot opened the door as silently as he could. Within was a small throne room, complete with a statue and 6 tall stone pillars. It was dark, and the group tiptoed inside the hall. Splat! And splat again! Webs covered the 5 and pinned them up on the wall.
My name is Nezda. You might know me as the Black Spider. You horrid spiderly fiend! Let us out immediately! I'm not actually a spider, you know. Of course you're a spider. It's your name. Names describe things. That may be true. Names do describe things. Such as the forge of spells. I much desire that thing. If you're willing to locate the forge of spells for me, I might let you live.
The group looked at each other in a short panic.
We agree to your terms, but we must know what it might do if you use it. Find it, or die.
A little choice. The group sliced their way through their webbed encampments and headed back into the mines. It was a few hours of left-hand ruling when the friends found yet another metal door in the rock face. Giggett tried to open it, but it would not budge. Taft tried his luck on the blockage, but it was no use. It seemed to have been barred from the inside. Therefore, it called for but one action. Knock, knock, knock. The tip of Emrys's staff connecting with the top of the center of the door, causing loud reverberations. Some scuffling was heard from within, and not a minute later, the scraping noise of the release of a very heavy object was evident from the far side of the metal thing. The door opened slowly, with a comedically large X holding the gap between the door and its frame while it swung. There he stood, 7 foot tall and the hair of a wild bear. They knew it as a bugbear, having not been the first time they'd encountered such creatures, although their last meeting consisted of several fried bugbears in one of the rooms located at the Red Brand hideout, shortly after Emrys had entered the room alone and had closed the door behind him all those weeks ago. The axe, which now seemed a more reasonable dimension, was pressed up against the old man's neck.
Right, why should I kill his fossil right now?
Hector slowly raised the wax seal, one gifted to him by Nesnar, or, as they like to call him, Spider-Man. The bugbear's eyes widened, and he swiftly apologized for his rash actions.
You can't be too careful down here. Most things are enemies.
He stood in the doorway for an amount of time, just long enough for it to be slightly awkward. He seemed to have caught a glimpse of a certain gnome, and as his eyes danced between those who stood in front of him, it could be painfully obvious that a far greater share of his gaze was directed towards Giggett. There were a few bunks left available inside the bugbear's paddock, but, in need of good rest, the companions slept well among the company of the enemy's subordinates. When they woke, the bugbears were all begone. Shields and weapons missing from the racks on the walls. Giggett explained that Buggy had gone out searching for the very same item which they sought. Fully rested and restored, the group once again head ever deeper into the lost caves and mines that form the labyrinth of Wave Echo. 5 hours of travel. The passage seemed to be getting narrower and narrower. Certainly, Emrys's stance was noticeably more crouched. But the little beings that followed the light of the glowing staff seemed less affected by the encroaching damp rocks. The name, Wave Echo, seemed to have been chosen with wisdom. For the longest time, almost since they had entered from the outside, they had heard the noises of water, sometimes trickling, sometimes louder. It often felt that behind the thick rock walls was an ocean. They weren't far wrong. The noise of water was getting louder and louder. It was roughly lunchtime when the companions squeezed through a particularly thin opening, which became a very large cavern. Perhaps the biggest they had seen. Or hadn't seen, rather. There was a thick mist covering most of their vision beyond 30 feet, and no sign of cavern walls bar the rough face they had crawled out from. The splashing noise was deafeningly loud, and there was clearly some aquatic feature close by. Death took only a few steps forward into the mist when his foot failed to gain traction on solid ground. Saving himself from falling over, he noted that the ground fell down to give way to some black, dense water. He called back to the others to be wary of their tread, the others whom he could not see, but only the light of Emrys's wooden staff. Strangely, he saw the star in the mist rise higher than its usual resting position. A pulse of light, different and orange compared to the usual teal-white emission, only far brighter when it shone for a far shorter period of time. The pulse created a shock wave, which passed through the mist and fog like a ripple through water. Where the light had been, there was clarity. Soon they could see the entire cave. It was an underground lagoon. What had once seemed dark and foul water now revealed itself to be crystal clear and warm. A pure moment of bliss for the group. They had not admired the natural world for some time. What they saw was a privilege to behold. Whoever designed such places was clearly someone caring and wonderful in their own right. Deep inside, Emrys might have known such a being once as a friend, perhaps. But his thoughts never surfaced as the companions absorbed the beauty of the underground gem. As night consumes the day, the mist and fog crept back over the water surface slowly. While they only saw it for a brief period of time, the group were happy to continue with the knowledge that the heart of goodness was behind their quest. Another 4 hours of caving, crawling, and wandering. They were faced with a shining room. Its power was clear. They had arrived. Many crystals hung from the ceiling and rose from the floor, much like a metaphorical dark mirror of the very first room they had entered the previous morn. In its center was a small pantheonic building with cut stone steps, cold as ice. They clambered up to reach a magical well. Dancing green lights, as wondrous as anything they had seen before. Smoke surrounded the thing, and fell to the floor with a weight and thickness similar to that of water. From the mist came a creature. by far the strangest thing they had ever encountered. He was a floating eyeball-like creature, with several tentacles sprouting from his face. He did not have a mouth, or nose, or anything of the sort. Truly an incredible being in its own right. Surprisingly, communication was less of an issue than once thought. The sentry blasted words in the common tongue. He demanded the companions leave at once, or be destroyed. But how? How would such a thing such as this create such a noise? They all heard it. Only Emrys's eyes were closed. They all felt it, but it was different. This was the voice of the wandering fool, but how could it be? What they heard in their minds was ill-aligned with the noises that came from Emrys's mouth.
I am here to relieve your duty, Sentry. Your years are up. It is time for someone new to guard the Forge of Spells.
The group looked at Emrys, then at the thing. Now both their eyes were closed. Hard to explain. A feeling of gratitude seemed to radiate from the creature, and then a relief, as if a weight had been lifted off its shoulders, if he had any. It was at this moment when the thing's eye began to glow a deep orange, and a black portal began to spin itself into existence in front of it. He drifted inside.
Thank you, Emrys. May your God be unbroken.
The last of the thing fell into the void, and it closed as dramatically as it had opened.
How did you know? I mean, you can speak with that thing.
Like a guess. I hold a time of deep speech. Wizard's Manual, page 643, line 12, clause 4. All strange things probably speak the deep speech. I can teach you one day.
It's been there for 600 years, you know. High time you got a break, I think.
The companions stood in a vague circle around the Forge of Spells. Their next moves would need to be planned carefully. A decision was made to search the rest of the cavern which housed the magical smithy. Behind was another small building, this one more homely and out of place somehow. It had a wooden door, and wasn't unlike some of the cottages found in Thundertree. This entrance was unlocked, and they all creeped inside. A hand, just a hand, black and half visible, like smoke or soot. It came from the walls, and it grabbed Teft by the throat. A voice seemed to come from the house. It hadn't a direction to it. It demanded the immediate exit of the other companions, or their demise. However, the group were not so easily frightened by strange beings anymore, and they asked if it may barter with them for the life of the halfling. Teft's eyes were firmly locked on a chest located on the other side of the room. Who knows what treasures might be found in a place such as this? So far from the living world. The creature manifested itself in front of the companions, a demonic being, mostly smoke and little else. He reminded them of things past, and that all had died to get them this far. He was interested in but one item they held, at the very bottom of Hector's bag, taking up the greatest room, the head of a poisoned dragon. It was surely a rarity, even above ground. Down here, it would be unlikely a dragon had ever stepped its feet, even one as small as the owner of the head that Hector now held in his hands. The mystical smoke wrapped around it and consumed it. Soon naught of the head could be seen, just smoke, and slowly the smoke constricted beyond the physical size of the dragon until it vanished completely. The creature whispered, "One moment, and it will verify the findings." All of the smoke subsided. It was calm, but only a mere second. The companions looked to see the halfling, now released, brandishing his axe over the lid of the wooden chest.
"Teft Wildcloak, you dare continue with your swaying, at the peril of all."
Teft looked back, smiled a little, then released his axe upon the box.
"Blithering imbecile!"
Instantly, the smoke reappeared to fill the room once again. Two great hands picked up Teft and threw him to the ground.
"You have forfeited the duel. You will now all die."
A humanoid manifested from the smoke. A spark of energy came from its scythe as he sliced towards Teft. The companions retaliated at once. Emrys's staff created great noises around them. Hector swung his great flame blade, and Giggit released his burning hands once more. But it was no use. He was unaffected, unharmed. He laughed. Giggit ran to a corner and swung down his bag. He rummaged without a care, throwing all sorts of items and treasures onto the stone floor, until he pulled out a scroll. The second scroll from the dead body of the wizard Yano, whom they had found in Thunder Tree so long ago. He tossed it to Emrys, who caught it with skill. The words on the page were shining. "Paraboles, ignition, Temra." There was much more to read, but the scroll seemed to have grasped a life of its own. It disintegrated, and a great ball of fire began to create itself. It started spinning in front of Emrys's hands, and began to spin towards the evil thing. It met the energy being released from the scythe at first as an equal, but it soon overran it, carrying straight on. The beast cried out, and the smoke became flame. With a great explosion, it left the plane of existence, leaving a burned house in its stead. The group was safe once more. Teft learned a valuable lesson. Don't fuck with ghouls. The journey back to the throne room was swifter. They had gained almost 2 hours on their old trek, passing by the now deserted bugbear barracks just as they became hungry again. They wondered where the beasts may have gone to. Perhaps they were lost. In any case, they would need to rest before confronting Naznar once more. They barricaded the doors themselves this time. Giggit was visibly sad, but it was necessary. The lost mines of Fandel Var are full of unholy creatures. The morning came, and it took them 3 more hours of travel before the cold iron door was again in sight. They stepped inside. There he stood, the black spider. Behind him was several soldiers, one proactively looking away from the group, perhaps in shame.
Well, my sources say you have found me the forger of spells. So, where is it?
Gundren suddenly cried out.
My brother! Leave him be, you animal.
I don't think so. Kill the prisoner.
The old man then interjected.
No, we'll not tell you the location if you lay harm on that man.
Deal.
Follow the left wall. Past the blue ocean, up the steps. You got me more than 7 leagues up the ground. Now give me back my brother.
No, Gundren! What have you done?
Buggy began to tear up a little, and he span to face the chained dwarf. With the slice of an axe, he beheaded him. Once again, a spurt of webs found themselves wrapped around the 5 companions, and all went dark.
Fools! Kill them!
But the friends would not go out without a fight. Despite impaired vision, they fought and all that swung at them, killing many soldiers, goblins, spiders, and bugbears alike. Gundren swung wildly, hitting one of the 6 stone pillars, causing it to crumble. And, for a second, they could all see.
Destroy them!
Shouted Emrys, as he cast a great wave of thunder to the furthest magical pillar. More light. Teft could now see well enough to make out the shape of yet another pylon. He used all of his might and cracked the thing at the very bottom, causing it to fall. Soon, each of the companions could reach a pillar, and the ceiling began to come down, giving them sight once more. Asnar screeched, and began to grow many times his size, thick black legs emerging from his abdomen. Before he stood against the group as a gigantic spider, he quickly pinned down Giggit, Gundren, and Hector with 3 of his legs, almost piercing their armor and skin. He spat yet more webs at Emrys, holding him up on the ceiling at the far side of the room, incapacitated. Teft, the humble halfling Teft, knew it was up to him to destroy the thing. He flourished his axe in his hands naturally, and went for the strongest attack he had ever produced with his own muscle. It hit the spider, and it recoiled before spitting more webs at the short man. Teft tried to move, but it was no use.
Useless fools. The forger spells is mine. Ah!
You hurting my little friend. Buggy killed Spider.
The wounded bugbear brought down his comically large axe on the back of the spider, causing it to cry in agony. Asnar span to face the buggy, releasing the others from the grip of his many legs. He brought down his fangs on the bear and went straight through his fur, then his body, then his fur again. He died a tragic death, but he bought time enough for the companions to once again rally against the spider. Fire, thunder, and blade hit the thing where Buggy had wounded it. And so it was, the death of Asnar, the Black Spider. Gone, once and for all. This marks the end of the Adventures of Emrys, Volume 1. Thank you for listening.